Good afternoon, Irish Breakdown land. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. That guy over there is Brian Driscoll. He is the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. And we are back. It is Sunday. It is a fantastic Sunday because I know I don't have to go to work tomorrow. So it's a great Sunday. Or the other work. Be here for this work because this is the important work. But we have a great show for you guys today. We are going to continue our 2-year review of recruiting.
Whoa! You better be ready to bring it, Vince. If you're already telling people it's going to be a great show, you better have your A game ready to go.
Don't worry.
You made the promise. You made the promise.
I'm ready, brother. I am ready to go. So don't worry about that. But so we are going to talk defense today. We're going to talk about our 2-year recruiting grades for defense. Yesterday we did offense, so if you're here for offense, stay for some defense, baby, and then go back and watch the offense. So I'm excited about this because, again, I mean, we mentioned this yesterday, that the 2-year grades, I think, are more important than just looking at a 1-year class in a glass box, right, or in a nutshell. I think that this is so much more important. Because it's all about fit and it's all about filling your needs and, all of those things like wide receiver. It's going to be the same grade if they go kill it in 23 that it was for the 2-year grades here because they still only got one this year, right? So same idea moving on to the defensive side. So I'm fired up. Brian, how are you today?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Just relaxing.
Yes.
Doing some prep for the week, getting my because we're going to hammer with Oklahoma State stuff this week. So
yeah, we are.
This is kind of our way of putting a little bit of a bow on the 2022 class for now, right, and starting to get ready for the bowl game. And then we'll get back to recruiting after the bowl game, and as they have another signing period coming up, and then we'll get into 2023, and they're already offering 2024 and 2025 kids, and so
my phone hasn't rang. I don't understand why. But
yeah.
I mean, my kid needs to be offered his 25, but no, I was kidding.
Yeah, well, they're going to need a kicker by then. So
I know that's all I'm saying.
They can grow about 8 inches and be all good.
He's getting there slowly.
Okay.
All right. So defense, Brian. Do you want to give an overall view of the defensive side, or you want to just jump right in?
I think overall view is good. I mean, just to remind people, if you didn't watch the show yesterday, these grades are determined by the talent of the players they've landed, meeting the needs. So, if you needed 5 ends and you only got 3, that impacts it. If you needed 3 and you got 5, that obviously is going to be a positive to a degree, but you could sometimes get some bad roster management and you've got you're taking too many kids. So all those things factor into it. The grades come down to this. An A grade means you're elite. You are college football playoff championship caliber. B is outstanding, top 15-ish caliber. C is solid, borderline top 25, which, that 20 to 30 range. There's no DNFs, so we don't need to tell you what those grades are. And so fortunately, Notre Dame, I have given those out to Notre Dame in the past at positions. We have not the last 2 years, at least not in the 2-year grades. There are some individual years, like when they struck out at safety one year and struck out at corner one year and struck out at linebacker another year. Or no, they chose not to bring in any linebackers. There have been some but the 2-year grades, we haven't seen that. And so, as we kind of look through and we'll kind of do D-end and D-tackle, because I think those two need to be separated, because especially now, because I think we're seeing a shift in how they're recruiting the defensive line, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But just really diving into it, I think that look, the 2022 defensive class is excellent. It's one of the best hauls that Notre Dame has had on either side of the ball in the last 10 years. But the 2-year grades for the team is, I think the defense is not as strong as the offense. And a lot of that is because of this last year's class not being as strong on defense, because there were some misses last year. You took some projects at some positions last year. And so I think it's quite interesting to see how that has all kind of transpired. And you're in a situation now for Notre Dame where they've got to go out and continue to build on the success of 2022. And it's early yet, but I'm really looking forward to sitting here a year from now and doing the 2-year grades for the next year's class, because
For defense,
it's gonna look a lot different. I mean, as long as they just keep what they already have in the class, the 2-year grade at defensive end is going to be A+. I mean, it's just really excellent. The 2-year grade at linebacker is going to be A+. We'll see what they do at cornerback and safety, but with where things are trending with a couple of 2023 defensive backs, I think that grade is going to be strong as well, a corner and a safety. So that's going to be fun, but this is part of it, right? It's starting to stack up some good hauls back to back to back is the key.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And having Marcus Freeman at the helm, obviously defensively, it's a great class this past year, right? The 22 class was a great class. But again, we're doing 2-year grades, but you're right. 22 plus 23 is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be a lot of fun to talk about if things keep trending the way that they are right now. I mean, obviously a ton can happen in the next 12 months. Nothing is set in stone, obviously. So, I have a lot of faith that it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about. Defensive line, Brian. So let's just jump right into some position grades here. We talked about this yesterday. We're going to do defensive line as a whole, correct?
Or end and tackle.
We're going to
end and tackle. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the reason I decided, because yesterday we had said we were just going to do it as one. Defensive tackle is not going to take a long time to go over the grades, just because the numbers, but to explain why the numbers are what they are.
Correct.
Is kind of where I want to go.
Okay. So grade for it, we're going to go edge, right? So defensive ends first. This one, I really like the 22 class. Gave them a high grade when we did this last week for good reason. I really like this defensive end class for 22. I think the 21 class for me is more about upside than it is
a lot of
about
projects,
current studliness. You know what I mean? Like that's and look, there's nothing wrong with that, right? They had some depth at the defensive end spot when they brought those kids in, right? They didn't need those guys to, be guys right away as they've had to on the defensive line in the past, right? So I was okay with it, but if we're just looking at it from these are the guys that they got, I have to ding them a little bit, right? And so that's where I'm at. So for me, it's a B for the defensive ends. I love like I said, love the 22s. 21s have a great upside. Like my grade could look foolish, to be honest with you, moving forward. It could.
Yeah, but that's kind of one of the dangers of taking players like that, though, Vince, we've talked about this. When you take a bunch of low floor, high ceiling guys, the bust rate is higher. The miss rate is going to tend to be higher. It's like the whole 5-star versus 3-star debate, right? The one thing that statistically is proven true is 5 stars tend to hit at a higher percentage than 3 stars. That's the only place where you can argue 5 stars are better than 3 stars, because if you have a roster full of 5 stars, the odds that more of them pan out and play like top players is greater than if you have a roster full of 3 stars. You could have a roster full of 3 stars that are all American first-round draft picks.
Sure.
If you took all, but it's more about the percentage, right? It's the odds.
Yeah.
And that's what I say. Stars don't matter, right? Great players are great players, but if you're going to be honest in it, you have to say, look, getting more higher ranked players usually tends to up your chances for success, right? And last year's class was 2. Well, it was 3 players, but we're only going to count 2. We're not going to discuss Devin Upal because he's already left the team. So we're going to only talk about the kids that stayed. That's Will Schweitzer. I'm sorry. I should have given I did. I followed into your
pulled events.
Your pulled events. My grade was a B+, which is actually higher than what I gave when I wrote the article a couple days ago, because I kind of thought through it and I was a little too tough at the time. But
I didn't realize you wrote an article. I thought it would come out after we did this. Okay.
Yeah. Nope. Wrote an article on this a couple days ago.
Good for you.
And so when I did the article, I gave him a B. I'm going to give him a B+ now. And the reason I look at it is because I dinged him a little bit too much for the projectiness of last year's group, which is Jason Onye and Will Schweitzer. And then, of course, you have Tyson Ford and Aiden Gabert in this year's class.
Home run.
Which is an A. And I wrote, this year's group is an A. So for it to be a B, I'd have to say last year's group was a C, but I don't think last year's group was a C.
It's a good
you know,
point.
because of the upside. So I mean, it was like to me, it was like a B minus, C plus at worst. And so when you look at the fact that they signed 2 top 100 defensive ends in one class that have the size, the length, the power that they're looking for, you signed 2 long kids in this class. So you met your style need, right? I mean, you want long, twitchy players. You met your edge need. You met your upside, high impact talent need, right? Not only you get some projectable kids in 2021, but you have some legit, okay, guys are going to be ready to play early in their career in 2022. And you met your numbers needs. Now, my only concern, and the reason that I dinged them down to a B is the projectiness of, I love making up words like evaluation words.
The projectiness.
Because that's what you can do when you're doing like evaluation, because there's like no real word that goes with it. So you just make them up and hope they catch. But it's also the fact that I still view Jason Onye as potentially being a moving inside. And so what I did was I kind of went away from what I had said the grade standard was, which is we're just evaluating these kids off what they were as high school players. Sure. We have since learned that Jason Onye's really filled out and really grown in size, but he was 245 when he signed at Notre Dame. He was actually a little less than that. And so it's kind of like I'm kind of projecting forward something that hasn't happened. And that's against the criteria that we set for this.
It's against the rules.
So that's partly why I bumped it back up to a B+. Now, the reason I do that is if Jason Onye moves inside, now your numbers are short. And that's where the ding came from. But so far he hasn't moved, and so it was unfair to ding the grade because of that. So that's why I bumped it back up.
That's fair.
To a B+ when looking at it. But there's a lot of length.
And that's clear that they like that
talent.
length and
athleticism. I've joked with Coach Elston before, and when we've been able to interview the staff and stuff, I said, do you do like a test? Like if a guy can't look you in the eyes, you don't recruit him? Is that kind of like – because Mike Elston's 6'5".
Yeah, he's a big boy, yeah.
And so it's like he kind of joked like, actually, yeah, kind of. But Jordan Patelho can't do that. But for the most part, they like really, really long players. And Marcus Freeman does as well. And if you're going to run a lot of 3 down – you need defensive linemen that are really have great radius, have great length, be disruptive and things like that. And that's clearly what they're looking for.
Yeah. And the other thing, which goes against the B that I gave, but I'm going to go ahead and say it anyway. When you bring kids in who have a high ceiling, right? They have high upside. When you have a coach like Mike Elston, it kind of erases some of those things, because he is a really, really good position coach, and he can change some of those projects into some dudes. So there is part of that, and I could very easily talk myself into raising the grade because of the position coach at Notre Dame. And I trust it.
But that's not –
But that's not part of the criteria.
Right.
I get
but
that.
But it does kind of factor in, though, is if you do have some projectable players –
yeah.
If you have a position group that has proven to be capable of maxing them out at a higher level, then you're gonna feel more confident in that group.
Right.
It makes total sense.
Yeah, right.
Whereas at another position, receiver, safety in the past, offensive line currently, those are positions you're like, I'm not sure if that's gonna really. If that guy's going to get developed the way, my big concern with Tosh Baker when he signed was kid needs a lot of work. I don't know if the guy there
still can
coach him up. And so it makes total sense.
Yeah.
It makes total sense. It really does.
So let's move inside.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk defensive tackle. And this is a tough one for me. I actually have 2 grades written down because I'm on the fence about it. And it's tough for me. So my fence, I've got C+ B-.
Okay.
That's where I'm kind of I don't know which way to go with it. Because look, the 2-year numbers is 2, right? That's low. And I know that they're trying to go to more 3 down. I get that. But that wasn't the case last year. It
was early.
Okay.
And we got frustrated by it, and we wanted to do less of that. You know? That's
right. I don't like the numbers. I don't like the numbers at all. I don't like only having 2 guys. Even if you're going with a 3-down look, I still don't like only bringing in 1 guy a year. That doesn't work for me. And so I dinged them on that. Now, on top of that, Donovan Heinisch, I think I guess I'm higher on him than a lot of people because I think that he can play himself into a better player. But the bottom line is,
right.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I think that probably is part of it. I think and I said this before, I think he's a more athletic version of his brother. And so he could have a lot of success at Notre Dame, but his ranking and things of where he's at coming in right now, because we're not really allowed to project, right? So it's lower than I think guys they could have had or guys that maybe they should have gone after harder. I love me some Gabriel Rubio, though.
Right.
I think he's a stud. I was actually disappointed he didn't get more playing time this year. I think was there injury issues there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they were super deep, which I'll kind of get into when I talk about my grade.
Then that's fair.
I mean, who do you take off the field? Do you take Howard Cross off the field the way he played? Do you take, Kurt Heinisch? Do you take Adam Yola?
Sure.
Do you take Riley Mills? Do you take Jacob Lacey? I mean, who do you take off the field?
That's a really good point.
Gabriel Rubio some snaps, but Gabriel also did battle, I'm told, a couple different injuries during the season. So they just went ahead and said, hey, you know what? Because Gabriel's the kind of guy that I do think he could end up being a fifth-year guy just because of the type of kid he is. And if he's not, he's not. But, that's one of the few times I felt like they didn't need to push to get a kid on the field, in my opinion.
Yeah. But for this discussion, I love Gabriel Rubio. I think he's a great pickup. I would have liked them to bring in a second guy. And even though I'm fairly high on Heinisch, I still would have liked them to bring in a second guy. And then from a ranking standpoint, he's not where I think that they needed to be. Like he would have been a great second guy to bring in, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? If you could have landed a Lucas, then you're bringing in Heinisch as not a filler, but like as a second guy. I'm cool with that, right? So that's why my grade is where it's at. And again, I could be talked into a B-. I could be talked into a C+. Like I'm right there with this just because of a numbers issue and because I think they could have done better than Heinisch in this group if they brought in a second guy.
I think for me, I gave them a B- because I do think they needed one more guy. I didn't quite ding them all the way down to C+ because I don't think they necessarily needed more than one guy. And I do think Donovan is still a little bit of a risk because I don't think he's as big as Kurt was at the same age. That's my concern. And I don't think he's an edge guy. I don't think he's a 5 technique and a 3 down. I think he's got to be an interior guy. And I don't know if he's going to be able to hold up the way that Kurt did. Now, I've learned it's not a good it's bad for your business because if you're someone who values being right, it's bad for your business to bet against the Heinisches.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
So but I've got to be honest. I have some size concerns about Donovan in the new defense. Now, the style that they play, like it's more about where they line up, but the style they play is about penetration. It's about quickness. It's about athleticism. I don't see him being any smaller than Howard Cross III. I mean, and so that's where I'm kind of back and forth on that one with Donovan. But the kid's a good football player, and
sure,
Mike Elson loves kids like that. I mean, look what he's got out of Donovan or Kurt. Look how he's got out of Howard Cross. Look what he's got out of, as Jacob Lacey got smaller, he got better.
Yeah. Look, the Heinisch, he's going to give you literally everything he's got in the tank at all times, at practice, in the game, like all of that. And again, this kind of goes back to the coaching situation. I trust Mike Elson because he's known Donovan for 5 years.
Right.
Like he knows who this kid is. He knows the family. He knows everything about him. So I trust that maybe this looks like a reach, but it's a very calculated reach by Mike Elston. And I'm totally cool with that. I just wanted one more guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Right. So at the end of the day, the reason I'm not as upset about the numbers is twofold. Number one, the COVID year completely changed their whole depth chart. I mean, it just completely changed it because gave Jacob Lacey a red shirt when he previously didn't have one. So Jacob Lacey still has 2 more years left.
Yeah.
Howard Cross still has multiple years left. Although Riley Mills basically played last year, it was still a red shirt. I mean, he's still a red shirt freshman again this year. And so when I look at it, I say, boy, there's a lot of kids there. You talk about Gabriel Rubio. I've heard some really good things about what the staff thinks about Aiden Kaneana, who again last year basically didn't count for him. 2020 he's basically a freshman this year again.
Crazy.
So if they redshirt him this year, which I believe they did, I don't think he's played more than 3 games. he could be technically considered a redshirt freshman next year
as a junior
because of the COVID year.
It's nuts.
And so I think that has really changed them, where they're getting super picky about who they bring into their interior depth chart. That's point number one. Point number two is when they go 4 down, my understanding is they are going to be going 4 down more in penetration situations, which means guys like Jason Onye, Tyson Ford are going to play some there as well.
Okay.
And so there's that. There's going to be snaps when our big ends, because Tyson Ford's 6'5", 260. He's already as big. He'll be as big as he'll be bigger than Myron Tungavaloa most of by the time fall camp starts.
That's nuts.
Right. Nuts. And Jason Onye, same way. Jason Onye, I've been told, is already 275 plus. So they're still edge players, but they can play inside in a three technique type situation as penetrators and things like that. So I think that factors into it as well, because the reality is it's hard for me to say you guys came up short of numbers when they chose this number.
Yeah.
And that's what, true. Now we can argue that, hey, that was a mistake, right? But as you mentioned earlier, this is a part of the staff that you kind of give them the benefit of the doubt a little bit. So now I want to see that pan out, because if it doesn't pan out, then it's okay. It's time to be critical. But they know their needs. They know their roster. And from talking to people, this is a strategic decision. Plus, there are some fifth-year guys that they want to bring back. And their thought is, if you bring another guy back, now you get into a really tricky depth situation where you have like 8 guys for kind of 1.5
position.
spots.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right,
1.5. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I get that,
and that factored into it as well. And you want to kind of space out that depth, since Aiden and Riley Mills are basically freshmen all over again. I mean, if we were going to get real technical, we could say the 2-year grade is Donovan Heinisch, Gabriel Rubio, Aiden Kanaana, and Riley Mills.
So the grade
from
goes
an eligibility standpoint.
The grade
it's
goes
up to a flipping A.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now that's not the case because those guys didn't sign, but the COVID year has really changed things.
You're right.
And staffs are trying to figure out how to properly handle it. And so that's why I think I'm more understanding of that, to where I would actually say B- with a questionable B, because I do view Gabriel Rubio as a top 100 to 150 caliber guy. And I do view some of the ends as being able to help out there. And we do like Donovan Heinisch. So I'm going to go B- and just comfortably go B-, because even though they're okay with those numbers, I just would have felt a little bit more comfortable with one more guy. And then you say, okay, well, what if Jason Onye moves inside? Well, then it moves up to a B. But then I'd have to think about moving the DN grade down to a B as well.
Because now you
come up short numbers.
Right. Exactly. And that's part of it. I mean, it is part of it is filling your roster, right? I mean, that's absolutely part of it. And I'm going to pull up the super chat, Brian, just because it fits what we're talking about here. You found something. But Garth says, Brian, what year is Alex Ahrensberger?
He was a 2020 signee. So he's technically going to be a redshirt sophomore this year, although because of the COVID year, you can count him as a redshirt freshman. I'm sorry. Somebody just sent me, my friend Matt just sent me a text, and it was a scene from Friday where Smokey says to Ice Cube's character, "How are you going to get fired on your day off? You got to be a stupid to get fired on your day off." He just sent that to me, but it was a picture of Urban Meyer as Ice Cube's character. So
that's pretty good.
You could get fired.
Pretty good.
Just stealing boxes for maybe trying to build a clubhouse. I know you ain't going like that. It's such a great movie. One of my all-time favorites.
That's pretty good.
Sorry, that's what I was laughing at, everybody. I apologize. That just was real funny. And that's Matt D's fault. Matt D just sent me that. So he totally distracted me. So anyway, Vince, but overall, I like what they've done at the D-line. The thing is, they've got to build on it next year. Like they need numbers and impact talent next year. You know what I mean? And this coming class is going to tell us just how they view recruiting interior players. Yeah. If it is going to really be a thing, or they're just going to recruit a bunch of big edges and then move some of those guys inside.
And that's kind of similar to like similar but different, but Harry Hiestand just recruiting tackles, and then
it's
get the
very
best guys
similar
on the field, right?
Because here's the thing that people have to understand is Notre Dame is not looking for a Lewis Nix type of player. It doesn't mean if there was that kind of kid that like Notre Dame wanted to come, they might not have a role for him, but they're not a 2-gap defense. And what that means is when Lewis Nix played, and man, I loved watching that kid play, is you had to have like 2 guys block him. His goal, his responsibility is I have both A gaps. Okay, so I'm going to take that nose on hard so where I can move to either A gap, right? He was responsible for both A gaps. That's how a lot of the old school 3-4s are. The front three, they're 2-gap players. They are securing their inside and outside gap. In the current, now we've seen evolution of the 3-4 to where certain teams, like I know the Chargers were doing this for a while when I believe Norv Turner was the coach, where they were a 3-4, but they were a penetrating 1-gap 3-4. Bob Diaco was a 2-gap 3-4. In a 1-gap 3-4, you don't need that big nose to just eat up space because your nose is going to be a penetrator. And you've got linebackers working off of them. You're doing twists and stunts and things like that. So it's not the same type of need for an interior player. So you don't need a 320-pounder the way that they play this defense. Now, I think I'd like to have somebody bigger than 275. But, again, they'll take power, they'll take athleticism, and they'll take length over just sheer mass. Because mass sometimes can't do the things they're asking them to do. Like Jordan Davis is a great player, and I'm sure Notre Dame would take him in a heartbeat, but he doesn't really fit what Notre Dame does. You know what I mean? And so you have to find a fit for what you do, and that's just – I know a lot of people like, why don't they go get the 320 pounds? Because that's not the way they play defense.
Right.
And it wouldn't really fit. They'd have to change what they do defensively to do that, and I just don't know if there's a need for that because it's just not who they play. Because if you look at Jordan Davis, he wins the award for like top defensive lineman in the country. Kid had 3.5 flipping tackles for loss and 2 sacks this year. He's just a space eater, right? And a bit of a hype machine, but a space eater. Well, if the nose guard for Notre Dame only has 3.5 tackles for loss in a full season, that's a problem. That's a problem because that means he's not doing what he needs to do, and he's not producing the way that he needs to produce. You look at Kurt Hinish this year; he had 4.5 tackles for loss in 3 fewer games. And so, it's just a different kind of defense.
Sure, absolutely. No, it makes a lot of sense. Our next position group is, frankly, one that I would be shocked if we have varying grades here. It's a linebacker class, and we have talked extensively about this year's linebacker class, the class of 4 guys, and and we both gave that class an A. I think you gave an A+, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. I think the first time I've ever done. I may have done that at time in the past, but I believe that's the first time I've ever given it an A+.
So A+ for Brian on the 22 linebacker class. I gave him an A. And then you add in the 2-man linebacker class from last year in Keanu Kia and Prince Kali, who are both also very, very talented linebackers. And I think my guess is that we're going to be the same. I gave this group an A. I don't – they had issues, obviously, going into last year's class because of the things that you mentioned earlier about – choosing not to get linebackers, right?
In 2020, 0.
Yeah. And which just still blows my mind, but that's a different conversation.
They chose that after they missed out on all their top targets.
After other people chose not to come, they chose not to. But a 2-man class was a great start, and then they bring in this 4-man class this year, and they just hit it out of the park, in my opinion, over the 2 years. They have restocked this linebacker room with elite guys, with guys that fill the need across the board that they need, right? I mean, they have a depth chart. Like we talked about this yesterday. 6 guys, they have 3 linebacker positions for the most part, right?
You could argue 4. I mean, but right now, I mean, they're a 3-3-5 or a 4-2-5.
Right.
It just
depends on how you look at it. But
either way,
they'll
go 4 linebackers at times. But they're fine.
These 6 guys do a pretty darn good job of filling out that depth chart, and they fill it out with dudes, in my opinion. Yeah. So it's an A for me. I'm going to be shocked if you go a different direction, but maybe you will. Maybe you'll go A+.
No, I went B-. No, I went A. This look, it was needed because the last 2 years I went C+. Last year we went C+ because I loved Prince Kali. I mean, you're talking about a top 50 to 100 player. Keanu Kia was a bit of a question mark because we didn't even know if he was going to show up because he was adamant he was going to take a Mormon mission. And
yeah,
then he just decided to come, and then it was like he's going to come and then take a Mormon mission. I don't know how that whole thing's going to shake out, but he's not he's not an impact player, but a good depth guy, good special teams guy. That's exactly what he was this year. He was a really good special teams player for the Notre Dame this year. But gave some depth where they needed depth, and then you had, like I said, Prince Kollie was just a really, really good player. And the nice thing is when Marcus Freeman was hired, you look at Prince Kollie and say, okay, your best defensive recruit fits the new defense. That's always the concern, is you just sign this great player and he doesn't fit what they do. Yeah. Well, he does. Athletic, rangy, long. He fits the defense perfectly. And we started to see him get playing time already this year. I mean, he used a year of eligibility, first playing special teams, and then he started getting more playing time at linebacker late in the year when they had some injuries. So, but it was a C plus each of the last 2 years, because in 2020 they signed 0. But we were still factoring in the previous class of Maris Luafau, J.D. Bertrand, Osita Ekwonu, and Jack Kaiser, which we really liked. It was another really good 4-man class. And so now you finally have a back-to-back class that you say, okay, now they're really rolling because they've signed 2 good back-to-back classes. And they needed numbers this year, and they needed length this year. They needed guys that could run and that are rangy this year. And they needed versatile players, because that's what Marcus Freeman wants. Is he doesn't want guys that you're just a Mike and you can only play Mike. There's really only one guy in this group of both years that can really only fit into one position, and that's Junior Tuihalamaka. Yeah. But even he could be a guy that can do some things that Bo Bauer's doing on third down, rushing the quarterback, things like that. Like even there, he still brings a little bit of flexibility, but he's probably not a Will. He's not a Rover. He's not a Sam.
He's not really an in-space guy for the most part.
He's a guy you see that running back, I want you to hammer that kid all game long. You see that guard, I want you to blow him up on the next 5 plays.
Old school playing a triangle. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Well, you remember what I texted you? You were at the Wisconsin game, and I texted you. I said, man, this would be a game where I would love to see Junior Tuihalamaka.
Yes.
And there's going to be games like that on the schedule. And so I loved the 2-year grades. And it's like we're so excited about the 2022 linebackers. And it's kind of like some people have already kind of forgotten about Prince Kollie.
Yeah, don't
forget.
And
as we said the other day, like Prince is going to – you're going to have to battle Prince, right? Because, I mean, this is a kid that rushed for 1,000 yards as a senior, almost 2,000 yards as a senior running back, had over 1,000 yards receiving as a junior receiver. And this kid's a football player. He's just raw. And we saw that, like, the first time Prince got on the field this year as a linebacker, I was like, he needs a lot of work. By the last time we saw him playing linebacker, like, okay, Prince, the light's starting to go on a little bit for Prince.
Yeah, exactly.
He just needs that experience, and that's why this year was really good for him. Because the kid needs coached up, because he was so raw, because his head coach had to play him all over the place because he was their team. And that's not a knock on their coach. I mean, his job is to win high school football games, not help Notre Dame. You know what I mean? And so you love Prince, and he brings versatility. I think Prince is kind of more of an inside guy than Jalen Sneed, where Jalen, I think, could play some Rover and some Sam and some different things. But I think Prince is really filled out his body in a way to where it's like he's kind of grown into an inside linebacker. But man, this is a really good group, Vince. I mean, and the best part about it is the 6 guys that they signed all fit exactly what Marcus Freeman wants from those positions.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And you could say, like, okay, Junior doesn't have versus. Hey, Marcus Freeman picked Junior. That was one of the first offers he made was to Junior Tuihalamaka, because he sees the need. Hey, you got to have a Mike on your roster that can just bump.
They're not in the Big 12, right? They're not in the Pac-12. They know that they're going to be playing teams like Michigan State, potentially Michigan,
Ohio State next year, who runs for 200+ yards a game, Stanford.
You need a dude in the middle that's going to snot bubble some people, right? I mean, that's okay, right? And so, yeah,
and who did his team play in the last time he coached Cincinnati? Georgia.
Yeah.
And he had to commit all these resources to stopping the run that it left them exposed to one-on-ones at the outside. So they held Georgia to 46 rushing yards, but they gave up over 400 passing yards.
Right.
When you have a guy like Junior Tuihalamaka, you don't necessarily have to overcommit resources, because you trust him to say, "Hey, Junior, if I don't want Georgia getting their, they better not hit a big run in between the tackles. That's on you." Yep. Right? I mean, you want that kind of player. You need that kind of player, and Junior is that kind of player. So
you have to be versatile in this age of defense. You can't just roll out your 4-3 and go no matter what offense you're running up against. Like this isn't that anymore. This isn't 1985, right? I mean, you have to be versatile. And so again,
where like everybody in the Big Ten is playing the same offense.
Right.
I mean,
yeah, exactly.
So when I look at this group, Vince, I see a Prince Collie that could be a Mike or a Will. I see Jalen Snead who could really play any position, but preferences is Will and Rover. Josh Burnham is a Will and a Mike. Could end up. I mean, he's so long and thick that who knows? Maybe he ends up kind of being a hybrid Viper kind of player.
That's exactly what I was thinking too. Yeah.
And then you got Nolan Ziegler, who is a rover. I mean, a rangy, athletic rover who also has the frame that maybe he could grow into a Will. Junior's that Mike that could do some third down pass rushing as well. There's a lot of length and athleticism. I mean, and it's hard to kind of just do justice to breaking down these kids because they all bring such skill. I mean, Nolan Ziegler this year had 25 receiving touchdowns.
Crazy.
Receiving touchdowns as a receiver. He had over 1,300 yards receiving this year for his high school team. There was a play he made. They played against Andrean, right? Did I say that correctly? Andrean?
Yes,
they
sir.
played against Drake Bowen's team. Nolan Ziegler was the best player on the field that day. I mean, yes, Drake Bowen's a 5-star recruit, but it wasn't even close to who the best player on the field was that day. It was Nolan. There was a play he made where he picked off a bubble screen and ran it back to the house. That's how instinctive and twitchy that kid is. I mean, that is you just you don't see that kind of thing very often.
What high school did he go to? Ziegler?
He went to Grand Rapids Catholic Central.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And they won, I think, their second or third straight state title this year, and it's all been on the back of Nolan.
Yeah,
I believe I was talking to his dad, and I believe Nolan is one of only two players that was on the whatever the dream team is in Michigan, whatever they have, that dream team or whatever. He was the only guy to be on it 2 years in a row. Like Burnham wasn't on it as a junior. Josh Burnham wasn't. Like Nolan was the only one because he's been such a great player. And then you got Josh Burnham is the Gatorade Player of the Year in the state of Michigan this year. Also had a monster year. You're talking about a quarterback that a linebacker that's 6'4", 215 pounds that rushed for over 1,500 yards and 20-plus touchdowns this year and had over 100 tackles and over 10 tackles for loss. I mean, you're talking about a special, freaky athlete. Jalen Snead is a quarterback, rushed for over 800 yards and over 10 touchdowns as a quarterback. That's the thing about these kids is they're not just athletic, they're really athletic and you hope they can learn to play football. These kids are football players. Now, they need harnessed in regards to the technique because they are doing so much.
Exactly.
But think about this. You have 4 linebackers in the last 2 years that were either 1,000-yard receivers or 1,000-yard rushers in high school. And one guy did both. Prince Collie did both. He was a 1,000-yard receiver.
Show up in my locker room.
I know, right?
Come on, man.
Well, in fairness, nobody else in South Bend has that either. So
no, that's true, but still.
But I mean, that's just what makes this group so much fun and so excited to talk about. Because it's just they're just athletic. Yes, they're athletic and they're rangy and they're toolsy, but they're just football players.
Yeah, and they could be so good as just focused on being a linebacker as opposed to doing everything else, right?
Yeah, Junior's the only one that's been a full-time defensive player in his career.
Yeah.
And he had 120-some tackles this year and like 14 tackles for loss or something. I mean, just the production is there. That's the other thing, Vince, that we don't often get to talk about. And Keanu Kia, to me, is still a big mystery because he didn't play his senior year because of COVID. And I mean, so it's like he's still a bit of a mystery. That apparently, they really like him.
Yeah.
He impressed a lot of people, but he's still, to me, an unknown. And we have to evaluate it based on where they were as high school players. We didn't see him pass his junior year when he was like barely 200 pounds. But the thing is you just look at this group and it checks. There's literally not a box that checks except maybe, because even then, like you say, well, maybe you needed another guy numbers wise, but then you start getting into that whole, you're bringing in too many in a 2-year span where you can't play everybody.
Right. And
then guys leave. Right now, this group of 6, you can play all 6 of them in a game.
Yep.
As part of a rotation, and that means it's going to be easier to keep them happy and keep them engaged and keep them locked in. And that's going to be an important thing too. Now, some of them will play early, some of them won't, but the future is there for them all to be able to play. And honestly, there's not a single one of these linebackers that I'm redshirting this year. A
No.
junior's not ready to play linebacker. That's fine. Put him on kick return. Put him on kickoff, and same thing with Nolan. I mean, it's tempting to want to redshirt these guys, but so few of these guys are going to end up being 5-year players. I mean, the only one that I would consider redshirting is probably be Nolan, just because I think that with his love for Notre Dame, maybe you have a better chance of convincing him for a 5th year. Plus, you look at the roster ahead of him. Do you want to maybe space it out to where Jack Kaiser's a senior when he's a freshman, and then Jack's a 5th when Nolan's a redshirt freshman, and then when Jack leaves, then Nolan's got, I mean, so but then it's like, but if you're the special teams coordinator, like, wait a minute, hold on, you're taking that guy away from me. Hold on a second, time out. Like that kid could be one of my best cover guys,
right?
And so it's going to be a really interesting decision to see if they are able to choose to redshirt any of them, but. Again, if you're going to talk about special teams as just as important as everything else, and you get your best athletes, how are you going to justify not playing all 6 of those kids on special teams next year?
Yeah,
and so that's the other thing that we don't often talk about. Their opportunity for great coverage and return units is enhanced by a group like this as well. And I have a friend of mine who is he's not at the school anymore, but he was at a school that coached against Notre Dame in 2020. And again in 2018, when Notre Dame had some really good coverage units. And I was like, what makes them so good? He's like, there's nothing they do schematically that we can't prepare for. He's like, but they got a bunch of 230-pound kids running 4.5s coming at us. He's like, there's just nothing we can do about it. Because Notre Dame you had the Jack Lambs, you had the Bo Bowers, you had, guys like that. And it's just like, Sidek Wanu before his injury. And it's just like, there's nothing you can do about it. When a kid 230+ pounds is running a 4.5 at you, and you're unless you're Bama and you've got your own set of it's just like, okay, this is exactly that's it. That's all you do. And that's pretty much what they did in 2020 against Notre Dame. It was just like fair catch, but I mean, and that's only going to continue and then some, in my opinion. And because like they had a great 2-year haul in 18 and 19, which is what they used to justify not recruiting the position in 20 and to a degree 21. But this group is even better than that group, in my opinion.
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
Because that group was more athletic guys that you weren't sure if they were football players. This group is football players.
Yeah.
And that's what excites you about it.
It's fun. This is going to be a fun group to watch and keep an eye on. No question about it. Okay, so let's go outside and let's talk about cornerback. And this one for me was very interesting because when I first wrote down CB, I immediately wrote down A-.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to kind of dig a little bit, and I started looking at the names from last year, and and I'm like, why? Maybe this should be an A. Like I really liked last year's class. I sometimes feel like maybe I like them more than the staff even like them, because I felt like they should have gotten some more opportunities this year than they did.
Mm-hmm.
Because I really like Ryan Barnes and I really like Phillip Riley, and I don't feel like they got on the field as much as Vince D'Addario, thought that they should have gotten on the field, right? And the limited practices that we saw, in the fall and on Sunday, for example, I just thought those two dudes stuck out to me, and they didn't play. And so that was like, okay, well, you know what? I'm sticking with my gut here, and I really like those guys. And
when you have to, because you can't factor what happened this year.
That's a good
into
point.
The grade. You have to look at what they were coming out of high school.
See, that's a really good point. And I also like Jaden Mickey and Ben Morrison. So I only stuck with my A-, and the people in the chat aren't going to be surprised because I'm stingy with my grades at times. But I really like last year's class, and I feel like from a numbers standpoint, they have 6. Mm-hmm. Okay, that those are good numbers over 2 years. I'm fine with that at corner, right? I have no problem with the numbers. I think the play level is good. I guess it depends on what they end up doing with JoJo Johnson, but right. I think they keep him where he belongs on the defensive side, although he could be effective offensively.
Him moving to offense wouldn't affect my numbers.
Okay.
Wouldn't affect my grade.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I really like this group, and I think they can be playmakers. I do. So I'm sticking with my A-, but man, I was close to giving him an A.
Really? Okay. I thought you were going to go in the opposite direction. Okay.
Yeah, no, I like this group, man. I do.
I went A- as well.
Okay.
And I just want to respond to a comment here. Brian Hockney asks, did you say C plus? Talking about the linebackers. So Brian, I said C plus. A is a joke, and then what I said when I this way is I gave a C plus to the last two. Like when we did this a year ago, I gave the group a C plus, and then when we did it a year before that, I gave it a C plus. That's what I was referring to, not this group. That would make if I said this group's a line. If this 2-year haul of linebackers C plus, you should find another channel to listen to because I'd be an idiot. Okay, but that's not what I said. This is an A. So here's how you look at this 2-year haul, right? Okay, did they meet their numbers needs? Yes. This is a position that needed a influx of just pure numbers. Now you needed guys that can play, and there's guys that can play, but you needed numbers.
Yeah.
And even if you lose JoJo Johnson, which right now he's still on defense, I actually did talk to somebody who knows JoJo, and apparently he should be good to go for the spring. So that's huge. That's good to know. If that ends up being true, that would be huge. So you got your numbers. You got six players in 2 years. Now, 6 is important because now with Marcus Freeman, they're going to be doing a lot more 3 cornerback stuff, which means 6 is even more important than just 4.
Sure.
Because normally you want to be able to get a 2 deep in a 2-year span or close to do it. Well, if you only had 4 corners and now you look at the defense and Marcus Freeman's trying to run, that's at least 1 guy short, maybe 2. So you met your numbers needs. They're trying to improve the length of the defense. Okay. Ryan Barnes is long. Philip Riley's long. Benjamin Morrison's long. And Chance Tucker has some length as well. He's not real tall, but he's long.
Yeah.
And Jaden Mickey and JoJo Johnson don't add a lot of length. But those guys are part of where you needed to upgrade your athleticism. I think they upgraded the athleticism of the group as well overall. And then versatility. You can't just have a bunch of boundary corners or a bunch of field corners. You need both. You need guys who can play both. Ideally, you want guys that can play both. And I think Ryan Barnes can play both. I think Philip Riley to a degree can play both. I think Morrison can play both. And I think Chance Tucker could maybe play both in time. Point being, because what you ultimately want to get to, especially if teams continue to go tempo, is to be able to have a left and a right corner as opposed to a field and a boundary corner. And that's, I think, kind of where Marcus Freeman would like to go, but at times, and they did do it at times this year. When they played North Carolina, they did a lot more left-right as opposed to field boundary because you don't want to, against a team that's going tempo, you don't want to have to have your corners constantly switching sides of the field. A, they don't get lined up. B, they're going to be flipping dog tired by the end of the game. So they met the versatility need too. They have guys who can play multiple spots in the cornerback position, plus a couple guys that can maybe move to safety if you need to. Now, the need isn't necessarily as strong there, and if you had to move a corner to safety, there's other guys I'd move before them. But, like Philip Riley. If Philip Riley could be a multi-year starter at safety if they needed him to be there.
Yeah.
As well as field corner, boundary corner, and nickel. I think he fits all those spots too. So they met all those needs, numbers, length, athleticism, versatility. Then it comes down to, okay, what kind of actual football talent did you land? Ryan Barnes, to me, is a top 100 caliber player. You know that. I love Ryan Barnes. Benjamin Morrison earned that kind of grade for me. Now, there are guys that also need more time. Benjamin, unfortunately for Ryan, he didn't get to play senior year football because of COVID.
You're right, and
that's
part
put him
of
back a little bit, right?
Yeah,
then he got that during camp and missed like a week or 2 of camp, and that just kind of put him back. I've heard some really good things about what the staff likes from him, what other players think of him. They like him a lot, but they just wanted to preserve a year of eligibility. Normally, I'm against that for corners, but because he missed a year of COVID year, because he's so skinny, I think that kind of got them to justify it. Plus, I think Brian Kelly has a different outlook on redshirting than I think Marcus Freeman's going to have because Brian Kelly kept trying to redshirt everyone for some reason, especially skill players that you have he fought Chip Long all year in 2019 on not playing Kyron Williams. Chip Long wanted to play Kyron Williams. Brian Kelly said no, wanted to redshirt him. How'd that pan out? Means you got 2 years from Kyron Williams. That's it.
Right. Exactly.
Instead of 3 in a year where they were woefully short on numbers all of 2019 because of injuries. So I think I love the talent. I think Philip Riley's a good player. He was a top 200 player for me. Mm-hmm. JoJo's a kid that I liked. Benjamin Morrison's top 100 kid for me. Jaden Mickey's a top 150 kind of kid for me that we talked about last week. His compete level is just through the roof. He's just a kid that's going to battle. He's talented. He's athletic. mean, I would say when I just look at the grades, I mean, you're talking about Jaden Mickey and Philip Riley are battling it out for the number 3 spot. And in past years, they're battling it out for the number 1 spot.
Sure.
But for me, I have Benjamin Morrison number 1 and Ryan Barnes number 2 as far as the grades they had in high school. And so when you're having that kind of conversation where you're grading out Philip Riley and Jaden Mickey for the number 3 and 4 spot, I think you're doing pretty good when it comes to recruiting corners. And I'd probably put Jaden Mickey ahead of Philip Riley right now, which means Philip Riley is the number 4 corner that Notre Dame has signed the last 2 years on my grading scale. That's really good. And so I love the talent. So it checked every box. Numbers, check. Length, check. Athleticism, check. Versatility, check. Talent, check. Now, the only thing this group lacks is a guy that's ready to come in day one and play. That's that surefire 5-star kind of guy. They haven't gotten that. Now, I think Benjamin Morrison can help them next year. There's no doubt about it. Will he? He's going to have some pretty good guys that he's going to have to beat out.
Exactly, and that's a good thing.
He can, right. He can. He's thicker and stronger and actually played as a senior compared to Ryan, and I graded Benjamin Morrison out. So basically how my ranking went is I have, if you want to look at like the 2 classes, the 6 corners in like a 2-year span, and you talk about like where I rank them, it's Benjamin Morrison 1, Ryan Barnes 2, Jaden Mickey 3, Philip Riley 4, JoJo Johnson 5, and Chance Tucker 6. Now, if you were to talk to some people at Notre Dame, they'd tell me, and they have, that I'm definitely, and I love this, that I'm way off on Chance Tucker. That he's way better than I think he is, which I'm like, cool. Because I said it last year, Chance Tucker's the kid that's going to make me look the worst in that class. Now, he was injured a lot this year, which is partly why he wasn't dressed for a lot of games. You'd see him stand on the sidelines with his glasses on, and
right,
because he was injured this year. But before that, man, I was hearing rave reviews about how he's performing in practice. He kid is instinctive, smart, and what I was told is where they said I was missing the boat. And again, it was hard to see this because he didn't play as a senior until like the spring, and it just is. They said he's a lot faster than I think he is. That's where they thought I was off in my evaluation, because that's one thing I said. It's like it's hard for me to really gauge just how well he runs because he does so much man coverage. He's just all over guys. You never see him just in high school. I just never saw him just turn and run.
Right.
And so that's what they like about him. But really high IQ kid. And when he's your 6th corner, I mean, they beat Washington for that kid. Jimmy Lake wanted him bad.
I remember that.
And Jimmy Lake may not be a very good head coach, but Jimmy Lake's a heck of a DB coach and a DB evaluator. And, this is a heck of a corner class, man, for Notre Dame. It just struck all the. I mean, you can see I'm going on and on and on just because of how much I love this cornerback class. I'm like, man, I'm not talking about JoJo enough. I'm not talking about Jaden Mickey enough, but it's just like it's a great group. So yeah, I went A-. And the only reason it's A-, Vince, is for exactly what I just said. There's no surefire step on the field day one. I'm the guy player. Whereas at linebacker, I think there have been those kind. I think Jalen Steed can be that kind of guy. I think Junior can play right away. I think Josh Burnham can be that kind of guy with a good offseason. So that's the thing I say. If you don't have that on a position, it's hard for me to give it an A. Even if there's a bunch of 5-star upside guys, if they're not guys that are ready to come in right now and play, then then it's hard for me to say A. And so that's where I'm at on that.
Final position that we're going to talk about today, and for me, and this isn't really a surprise for anybody, but this is my lowest grade. And we're going to talk about the safety position. And I did have 2 grades written down here. And I had a C plus written down. And again, if you listen to our commentary about the 22 class, it's because they signed one guy and they needed more numbers. Sort of.
Jaden Bellamy's not even a true safety.
Exactly. He was the guy that if you signed a stud safety, let's say Xavier Nwankpa comes to Notre Dame, now you can talk about Bellamy being a guy that can move over to corner. And, now he has to stay at safety. And I think that hurts the grade a little bit, right? And, last year they signed 2 guys, which is great. They signed G and they signed Walters. Is it Kari or Carey? Because I always mess
I think
it
it's
up.
Carey. I've heard both, but I'm just going
Okay.
with Carey.
Fair enough. I would just go by his last name like I do all my kids in class. G and Walters, they signed those guys, and those good guys, right? I mean, but none of those guys jump off the page to me, because if they did, I feel like they would have gotten playing time this year, because there was opportunity.
Yeah.
There was
Well,
opportunity.
G was always a guy that was going to need time.
Sure.
I think. But that kind of factors into the grade, though, Vince. It's like
Right.
none of these guys are like, I mean, maybe not even show up and play your first couple years.
Right.
Really.
And that's
So,
with what
yeah.
they've got going at safety, that's a problem right now.
And they didn't sign anybody in 2020. That's the other thing. They didn't sign anybody in 2020. So
I forgot about that.
Yeah, I went C+, and I felt like that maybe was a little bit generous, to be honest with you.
Well,
and it's just because I absolutely. I like Justin Walters. I like Jaden, but like I don't know if any of those guys are surefire starters.
Right.
You know, like honestly, I probably went too high on the grade here, if I'm being completely honest with you, because number one, numbers short, came up short. You signed 0 people. I mean, and you needed to move a corner and a receiver to safety to solidify your depth chart.
Which those two could be the starters moving forward.
Probably should be.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, like part of it is they're really athletic and talented. But again, if Notre Dame signs some big time safeties in 2021, you don't need to move those guys, right? So clearly Justin Walters wasn't ready, and clearly Carey G wasn't ready. Carey's a guy that I like, but my question with Carey G is, okay, does he fit what Marcus Freeman does as a safety? That remains a little bit of a question. He was kind of an alley safety to me. Could play some free safety, you know, he's long and rangy, you know, so we'll find out. I think Justin Walters is a good player. Is he a difference maker? No. He's more of kind of like what they have now. I think he's a little bit more athletic than some of the guys they have now, the veterans, but, you know, just more of a do your job, be a good hitter, be in the right place kind of guy, not like a, you know, future star kind of player. And so you don't have a lot of high. I mean, Carey G's got some upside, but not like, wow, that guy's the next Kyle Hamilton kind of thing, or the next. I mean, Alohi Gilman, even, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
So I look at it and say there's a lot of question marks in this group.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Jaden Bellamy ideally is a guy you want as a starter. I think you want him more as a rotation player. And so I don't view it as a group that necessarily fits with the rest of what you're doing. And as far as just the high, there's no impact, like high upside, like at corner, there's some risk there, right? We said, no, these guys are like show up day one, dominates, but Ryan Barnes, I think, could be a stud. Philip Riley could be a really good. Jaden Mickey could be really good. And of course, Benjamin Morrison, I think, could be an absolute stud. Linebacker, we talked about. D tackle, Gabriel Rubio, high upside. Defensive end, all those kids have a high upside. Here, I just don't see the same ceilings. G is the only guy that I view as being a high ceiling guy, but he is a really big difference between where he is and where he needs to be to get to that point.
Yeah.
And so that's why this is a big question mark position. And it's why they have got to hit a grand slam home run at safety in 2023. Now, the good news is they've already got a top 150 kid committed, and they're in a great position with 2 other top kids, Peyton Bowen. I think they're in even better shape in, but then Caleb Downs, there's a couple other safeties that are still on. They're gonna be better in next year's class. I mean, Adon Schuler has already graded out higher than any of the safeties that we're talking about. As a junior in high school, he's already graded out higher than Jaden Bellamy, Carey G, and Justin Walters. Now, part of that's unfair to Justin because this is also factors in. Justin didn't get to play his senior year because of COVID.
Right.
So he may have taken a jump because I heard he was a little banged up this year too. That's partly why he didn't play. Because remember, he had a really good spring. He really flashed in the spring. But we didn't get a chance to see Justin as a senior because of COVID. And he didn't have it, but the state didn't play. They didn't play fall football in 2020. So that's the other thing too, is we didn't get to see what Justin could be. So he's a bit of a question mark still to me. Because again, we can't really look how good he was as a freshman at Notre Dame. Okay, that gives me excitement about maybe what he could be as we're just talking about the team. But when we look at it from a recruiting standpoint, we have to evaluate what they were as recruits. And Justin was a bit of an unknown because we only got to see him play as a sophomore and as a junior. We didn't get to see him play as a senior. So there's a lot of question marks about this position. The good news, Vince, if you have a great front seven, you can get by with not having great safeties.
Absolutely.
But it does make recruiting 2023, that position becomes, to me, arguably the most important position on the team outside of quarterback in the 2023 class.
Well, and it was an interesting strategy by Notre Dame to not give up on the class of 22 down the stretch, but to focus more on the 23 class.
Right. Other than Nwapa, right.
Right. But you know what I mean?
They weren't going to get for a long time. Right.
Exactly. And it felt like, okay, well, we're going to kind of throw in the towel on 22, but we're going to knock it out of the park in 23. Now they have to. And I think part of that might be because of the rising factor of Watts and Henderson, right?
And how they're impacted by the COVID year. Again,
yes,
because of the COVID year.
That's a really good point.
They are technically freshmen.
Yeah.
And so, again, if we were going to get super technical with basically what guys are eligibility-wise, this 2-year grade would be Kerry G, Justin Walters, Xavier Watts, Ramon Henderson, and Jaden Bellamy. Different grade then. Now, Ramon, we would have some question marks because we don't know what kind of safety he would have been. But Xavier Watts, if they recruited Xavier Watts to play safety, we would have graded him as a 4-star player.
Yes.
There's no question.
Yes, no question about that. So very interesting. And so, again, they are putting a lot of pressure on the 23 class. They just are. And as you mentioned, they're doing a good job of it so far, but we're a year away from getting those guys inked. So, a lot can happen between now and then. I like where they're at, but they're putting a lot of pressure on that safety class in 23. So we're just going to kind of have to see where that trends and where that goes. Overall, Brian, I went the old-fashioned way here, and I literally assigned GPA points to each based on the grade that I gave, divided it by 5, and got a GPA for my overall. I can't, you could take the coach out of the classroom, but it is what it is. So mine ended up as a 3.13, which is between a B and a B plus. And I think that's about right. I would probably hedge my bet and go towards a B. But I have a solid, hey man, solid 3.0 GPA, solid B for this group. Obviously safety brings that group down and defensive tackle brings that group down a little bit for me. But it's a solid B for me. And I feel very comfortable with that.
I'm going to go B plus. I'm going to round up because, as I've said, I take context into consideration. And to me, I think Notre Dame hit it big at the positions that are most important to hit it big. And so there's some bonus points involved in this for me.
Oh, you give an extra credit. You're one of those.
Hey, when you put in the work, I'm not one of those people. If your grade equals A plus, I'm going to give you an A plus. I'm just saying it's called common sense. But I look at it and I say, look, there's a couple reasons why I go B plus. Number one, I'm factoring in the upside grades of so many of these players into this. Okay. Number one. Number two, I think for Marcus Freeman's defense to be effective, you need great edge players, you need great athleticism at linebacker, and you need corners. And they hit it big at all those. The fact is that the one position they came up short, they did so well at corner that there's some guys they can move to safety if they needed to. If we took Philip Riley away from corner and moved him to safety, it doesn't really impact the corner grade a ton. It impacts the safety grade a ton. And that's the way I look at it and say they signed 9 DBs the last 2 years, right? I mean, so if you look at the secondary as a whole, the grade's a lot better than it is with the C plus or the C that when you look just at the safeties. Because the reason I make that point is that we don't grade it that way. But if we did, because there are guys at corner that could move to safety and project to be multi-year starters there, then I think you have to look at it and say they're going to be able to put together a really good secondary some way, somehow, because of this group. Okay. And so, but when you look at how good the edge players are and the linebackers are, those are going to be good enough to overcome maybe the one position where you fell short. And they got impact players in the front seven. And if you look at every team that's won a college football championship, I mean, really going back to for even before the playoff, they all have impact players in the front seven, difference makers in the front seven. And you know, maybe you could argue LSU's the exception, but if you go look at LSU front seven, they had some pretty darn good players.
I was gonna say, they were okay there.
Yeah, they did pretty well.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's just what you need. And they met the numbers needs, they met the athleticism needs, they met the length needs of the front seven. It was such a good group, and the cornerback group was so good that I think it rings what do we always say, Vince? A great front seven, a great front four is better in a good back seven, or good back secondary is better than having a great secondary and just a good front four.
Sure.
Well, that's what we have here.
Yeah,
we
you're
have
right.
a potential for a great front seven, and you've got corners that can flat out cover. That's what's important in this defense. We saw that the last 5-6 games of this season. Notre Dame didn't have impact safeties, but the corners played really well and the front played great. And guess what? Didn't matter if they didn't have great safety play. The safeties still did their job and were just good, solid football players, because it was just be in position and don't get beat. And teams didn't have enough time to attack the safeties and take advantage of the safety play because of the front, because of the linebackers, because of the edge players, because of the interior players. And that's how I look at it. So that's why, to me, it's a B+. It's a borderline B+, but I'm going B+, because it's not quite like, okay, surefire, you're going to be great because of the safety position and because of the couple positions like corner and D tackle, where it's like, yeah, there's some great players there, but maybe, corner, you like a little bit more of a surefire thing. Maybe D tackle, you like one more player. But I think overall, this is a borderline elite group, in my opinion. And if I were to, I mean, as I think about it, and I think about what the class is and all that stuff, if I were to err on the side of changing it from a B+, I'd probably err on the side of A- than I would B.
Ooh. Just
because of how good I think the front seven is and how important a great front seven is. And because, again, I love the corner class. I mean, B+ at D end, A at linebacker, A- at corner. Those are the three most important positions that you have to be good at. You have to play well at safety to be great in college football today. You can't have safeties that don't play well. You don't need elite players at safety. You need great players at corner. You need guys who can play at corner. You can't protect a corner that can't cover.
Sure.
You just can't.
And that was always the knock on Notre Dame in the past,
right.
was the corners and edge players, right? Like,
right.
They can never get those guys, and they're proving people wrong left and right.
Yeah.
Oh,
no question. And Mike Mickens has inherited a dumpster fire at cornerback. And he has quickly just restocked that depth chart in really, really impressive fashion.
And that's a good point that you make right there. And if I was going to be convinced to raise my grade, it would be if I was going to add a coaching category to this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Because, again, you give me Mike Elston, you give me Coach Mickens, you give me Freeman as the head coach, you give me, Nick Lazinski potentially as a linebacker coach, whatever, right? I have all the faith in the world of the defensive coaches. And I think that if I added that part into the grade, all of a sudden my grade goes up, because I think they coach these guys up and I think they put them in a position to be successful. And could this group turn into and be a part of a championship defense? Absolutely. When I'm adding in that coaching aspect of it, because you can give this group of guys to some crappy coaches and that's not a championship level team.
Right.
But if you give this group to the coaches that Notre Dame has, it's a championship level team. So,
which is why the upside carries more weight than it would in other instances.
And that's a really good point.
Correct.
Right. So yeah, I can be swayed on that regard.
Well, I'm not going to try and sway you. I mean,
not you specifically. I'm saying in general. Yeah, exactly.
It's like if Coach Freeman gets on the phone with Vince, I don't like that B crap, man. Here's why you're wrong.
Yes, sir.
You could be swayed. Okay.
Yes.
I would hope you'd be a little bit more.
No. Yeah.
Firm in your foundation than that.
I'd be like, Chief. Coach, let's chat about some stuff.
Yeah.
All right. I've got some opinions.
Yeah. All right. Let's look at. We got some questions here, Vince. Let's get to some questions here.
Because
we're on a Sunday. You don't have a bell about to ring.
Nope. I got one right here.
You got some chitlins running around up there. We got a couple super chats I just wanted to pull up first.
Please.
Mike Sullivan, listening live poolside. Gonna miss some shows this week, but we'll catch up on the drive home. Merry Christmas, IB Nation. I love how we have customers that like in parts of our family here at IB that love to tell us when they're on vacation. Remember when Notre Dame 2164 was doing that?
As
He was like, just letting y'all know I'm in Florida on vacation. Now Mike's rubbed it in our face. It's all right. Whenever you're back home and you're just sitting there and it's cold wherever you are, Mike, Vince and I are going to be taking pictures of the warm Arizona air and the beautiful sun that we're going to be dealing with. Run your face. We're happy for you, Mike. We're glad
awesome,
you're having
Mike.
fun.
I'm glad he made it because wasn't he driving down with his family?
He was with his 2 kids.
Ooh, baby.
Yeah. And they didn't drive him crazy. So he was able to make it.
Man, hats off to you, sir.
All right, so let's get into some questions here, Vince.
Okay, I got one here from Hulk Strongest. He says, how strong is Keeley's commitment?
Okay, I want to address this because, listen, you can't ask Notre Dame to recruit 5-star players, and then when they do, freak out because everybody offers them comes after them, okay? Because this is going to be a miserable year if we have to every 5 minutes, every time Keon Keeley gets offered, it's like, oh, my God, are we going to lose them? This is the life of recruiting 5-star players, folks. It's other schools are going to come after them. So either A, suck it up, deal with it, and if there's news to report or we get concerned, we'll tell you. Okay?
Yes, we will.
But you just because otherwise that's all we're going to have to talk. Oh, so and so offered Keon Keeley. So and so wants Keon Keeley to visit. Keon Keeley visited somewhere. Okay, that's what happens when you recruit 5-star players. And Notre Dame got on Keon before he was a 5-star, but as we said at the time, this kid's going to be special.
Yeah.
And everyone's finally figuring out. As far as I know, from everybody I've talked to, Keon is very solid in his commitment to Notre Dame. Loves Notre Dame. He's trying to recruit other kids there. Is he humbled by all those other things? Yes. Marcus Freeman staying, Mike Elson staying. Those 2 things are big impacts on Keon Keeley staying. So, yes, do I think Keon Keeley is solid in his commitment? I do. Everything about him that I've been told says that he is. But at the end of the day, I don't really know until – we won't really know until signing day. Okay. That's the nature of how recruiting goes. Okay. But enough. You can't panic every time that somebody offers him because he's an elite, top 10 caliber player. People are going to offer him. They're going to come after him. They're going to want him. And Notre Dame fans have to understand that is just part of the package deal when you recruit 5-star players. Hey, guess what?
Yeah,
their schools are going to come after Drake Bowen. If they get a Don Schuler, as teams are going to come after. Ohio State's not going to give up recruiting Brennan Vernon. Okay, if they get Peyton Bowen, teams are going to still keep trying to recruit him. Same thing with all these top players that they're recruiting, and so that's just the way it's going to be. That's the nature of being elite players. That's where we want Notre Dame to be, right? That's what I say. Oh, they got to recruit the elite players. But then when they do that, it's like we all kind of panic every time elite players get treated like elite players by everybody else.
Right.
So as far as I know, Hulk, he is solid in his commitment. Anything can happen in recruiting these days. I've said that 1,000 times. Anything can happen, but as of everything that I know of as of today, Keon Keeley is very firm in his commitment. Loves Notre Dame, loves Coach Shelson, loves being part of this crew. And the thing too is that's why it's so important to keep adding big time players because Keon can look at it and say, boy, if you're able to get Peyton Bowen and they got Justin Rhett, who's a top 100 recruit. Remember, Notre Dame's got 4 top 100 players already in their class on defense. 4. 3 kids that are ranked as 5-stars by at least one outlet, I believe, still. And when you look at it, you say, boy, they're just getting started. Imagine if they're able to add Peyton Bowen, who's a top 100, borderline top 50 recruit. Imagine if they're able to add Christian Gray, who's a top 200 recruit. All of a sudden, Keon Keeley doesn't have to go to Alabama or Florida or Florida State or LSU or Georgia to play with a bunch of other top players. He doesn't have to do that. He can do that at Notre Dame. And that's important. That's important. If he's looking around like, man, I got a bunch of kind of just okay dudes around me, I need to play with better players. And he doesn't have to do that. He can do that at Notre Dame now. And that's important. It's very important.
Another recruiting question here from Antoine. He says, what are Notre Dame's chances on getting both Bowen and Caleb Downs along with Christian Gray and Malik Muhammad next year?
That's like the inside straight. That's the odds of them doing all that are not good.
Straight. That's great.
I feel good about Bowen. I feel good about Christian Gray. Muhammad and Downs are more long shots. Getting both of those guys. If they get both of those guys, then Marcus Freeman, Mike Mickens, and Chris O'Leary all deserve huge raises. I just don't think that's realistic. But someday, maybe that becomes realistic. I just don't think it is right now. And Malik Muhammad released a top 12 in the last month that didn't have Notre Dame in it. Now, they're still talking to him. He's still listening to them. Things can change. He's visited Notre Dame a couple times. I know that he likes Notre Dame. But as of right now, I just don't see that one being a fit. And I think they've got a good shot with Caleb Downs, but I would not predict them to get Caleb Downs as of today. But they're in there. But I do think they'll get at least two of those players. I think they'll get two of those players. I'm pretty confident they'll get two of those players. Okay? So, yes. Odds are not great of that.
As I'm scrolling through, Matt put up here, everyone make sure you hit the like button, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single show. Absolutely. How could I not throw that one up there, right?
Mm-hmm.
How could I not? We were talking about Kurt Heinisch and Matt D. It seems like Kurt has been here for 10 years. Elston was at the hospital when Donovan was born.
It really does feel that way.
I think that's hilarious.
It really does feel that way. It really
I had to
does.
pull that one up.
It really does. And I see JP Buellsfeld's comment. I will email you about that here in a little bit. So it's just about a way to people that can help volunteer, help Irish Breakdown volunteers succeed. Just keep doing what you're doing, buddy. Listen to all the shows. Just continue to support what we're doing. Buy the merch, but just engage. Just be a part of the community. That's the biggest thing. And then spread the word, But in those other ways you discussed, JP, I will shoot you an email on that one for sure.
Searcher Green, Scrooge McDario not given the A+. I think that's great. That's very it's Christmas time, so I like that. I do appreciate that.
Yep. Yep.
Not a lot of questions, actually. Here's a good one from Irishman. He says, how many linebackers do we need for 23?
I think they're okay just getting two.
Yeah, that's the number.
As long as ever, I mean, two is where I'm comfortable. And then what I would say is maybe there's like a third safety that could maybe eventually be like a rover / alley safety. Maybe you go there. The only way I'd go to three for me is if you have a loss in the current group, meaning, and a loss can be so-and-so moved to Viper, or, Nolan Ziegler is so athletic that they put him at safety. I mean, we need so-and-so at receiver.
Sure.
Heck, you may have to recruit Nolan Ziegler to play receiver the way things are going right now, receiver. You know what I mean? I say half tongue-in-cheek and half kind of legitimately I'm concerned about that. But, but barring that, so when I say lose, I don't just mean someone's going to transfer. I just mean literally someone could move position and like receiver, they didn't lose Xavier Watts from the roster, but they lost him from the receiving depth chart. So that's kind of where I'm at. And then, of course, timeout Tom, Nolan Ziegler was primarily a safety last year, and his 40 time is listed at 4.4, could be a safety at Notre Dame. He was not primarily a safety. He was listed as a safety. He played rover, basically. The position he played at Catholic Central was rover, not safety. So he is a safety, as was Drew Tranquil was a safety playing rover in 2017. The way that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah was a safety in 2020 and 2019. Technically, he was a safety. Rover is part of the 5, which is a DB position, but he's not really. I don't think Nolan is a safety in this defense. Now, if Zeke Modica could play safety, then Nolan Ziegler could play safety. But that's a different defense in a different era. I mean, you could have a thumper that was just an alley guy, that just a downhill guy that couldn't cover then. You can't really get away with that as you're in your number 2 safety role now. And so maybe they might have to do that. I don't think Notre Dame has to do that, though. I mean, if they bring back the 2 fifth years, even if they just bring back one of the 5th years, let's say they just bring back DJ or Houston, then you've got KJ Wallace still, you've got Ramon Henderson, you've got Xavier Watts, and then you've got the 3 kids that they've signed in the last 2. That's 7 guys for 2 positions. Numbers-wise, you're okay. I don't think that Nolan all of a sudden becomes one of the top 4 of that group if you put him in safety. So I think all you'd really be doing is stunting his development for the position he's ultimately going to play, which is rover.
We got a couple super chats at the bottom. You want to grab those so I don't lose my spot up here?
There we go.
Josh Miller, thank you so much for the super chat. Josh, really appreciate it. Says, Merry Christmas to you guys on IB Nation. I asked my wife for a year subscription, and she got it for me. Figured it was a fair trade since I got her a new car.
I think you made out in this deal.
I think you did too.
I think you got the better value. That thing's going to run down a lot sooner than IB is going to run down.
The subscription just keeps on. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
That's right.
I mean, it'll have that new car smell forever. So you're good to go, man. But thank you, Josh. Really appreciate it, man. Glad to have you part of it.
I don't know what that means, Vince, but I'm cool. All right.
I believe there's another one down there too.
There was your boy Connor Patton.
Connor, my guy. What's up, Connor? Thank you so much, man. He goes, I subscribe to the boards. Great value for a mere $5.
Yeah, $4.99 a month. That's all it is. And again, I want to make sure people understand too. This is not a special. We're not running a special for $4.99 a month. Like we're not doing that. Like I don't really the thing we're doing is if you're a member of Irish Breakdown, the message board, the premium message board, we're giving you a 25% off discount for the merch store. And we've had a lot of people take advantage of that during the Christmas time. And I've actually had a couple people where I've lost money because the prices are, I mean, if you knew what I was paying for it, and then I have to pay the shipping and all that kind of stuff, based on how it works with Printful. We don't make a ton of money off the merch. It was never meant to be that. It was more about building community.
Right.
There's been a few people that's like, because the discount, I've actually lost money. And I knew that was going to happen with some people because some people live like in places where the shipping is way more expensive and the taxes are way more. You get that. I'm not losing money overall. So we like to do things like that. That once you're part of the community, we'll try to find ways to, help you out there. But like my thing is, what I don't like is I hate when I pay for something and like you suck me in with this deal of, oh, it's $4.99, and then a year from now my credit card automatically hits and it's like, oh wow, it's $9.99 now. No,
it doubles
this
in
is
price,
just what it is, right? It just is that. And so if anyone had that question, like, okay, it's $4.99 now, but is it going to be $4.99 in the future? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, inflation's kind of kicking our butt a little bit, but right now I'm still good to just leave it where it is. But it's not it's not introductory rate. It's not a rate where we're promising you this and we're going to jump it way up next year. That's not the case. So just so people understand how that works.
We got a good run of questions right here, man. I finally found some. Here we go. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Blaine Tiller. Thank you, Blaine. He says, for next year, would you rather see Elston promoted to defensive coordinator or an outside hire?
I'm kind of good either way. I think that there's value in both options. I think part of me, it's hard for me to say that when I don't know who the outside hire would be.
Right.
It's like there's some guys where I'm like, God, I'd just rather make Elston the D coordinator. Like, and let's say they decide they're going to make Elston the D coordinator. I don't love the idea of your D line coach being your defensive coordinator because I believe there's just so much technique involved and it's just kind of a different kind of deal. So maybe you promote him or you move him to linebackers.
Which he's done before.
He's coached at other schools and he coached at Notre Dame. And then you say, okay, you do that, and then maybe you go hire a D-line coach. Okay, well, Larry Black's right down the street at Toledo. He's a kid that I think he's a young coach that I think is a star in the making as a D-line coach. He's done a great job at Toledo. He's a guy that coached at Notre Dame. He knows a lot of the players. He helped recruit some of the players on the team.
The continuity piece that they always talk about would be there with that hire.
Right. Yeah. And he's someone that Mike Ellison probably gave Coach Black more freedom to just do his thing than he's done with any GA that I've seen and from what I've heard. And so I think that is obviously something that would be very intriguing. But then there's the option of, okay, well, what if you just leave him at D-line and you make an outside hire? So I think there's a lot of possibilities here.
They're not rushing the decision.
It's hard for me to say. I would lean towards Elston because I think I know what Mike Elston can do.
Mm-hmm.
I know how involved he's been in game planning. Plus, Marcus Freeman's always going to be right there, involved in the defense. Or at least I hope he is. And so that's where I would lean right now. But then again, if you threw out a couple names to me, I'd be like, ooh. Okay.
And
And
the key is to find somebody that is not going to be too far off scheme wise from what they're trying, because they're recruiting towards a certain scheme, and that's important, right? And so that would be part of it. But again, Marcus Freeman's making the hire. He's not going to hire somebody that wants to run a 5-2. You know what I mean? There's that as well. So yeah, it would be very interesting to get some names on the paper before we make that call. But I love Mike Elston for DC. I mean, I don't think you could go wrong there. But yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, depending on who that outside hire is, you're sort of in a win-win situation. And the thing I do know is Mike Elston was not promised the D coordinator job to come back. I know a lot of people have said that or thought that. That is not the case. So if I had some say, well, if he doesn't get the D coordinator job, is he going to be mad and leave? No, because he wasn't promised that job to begin with.
Right.
And so I don't think he would do that. So, and then real quick from Father David says, don't blame me for the shipping and taxes. It's the Canadian government you want to speak to. Ha ha. Hey, and he's actually one of the people that I did lose money on. So, but he made up for it because he took a picture of himself with his new IB hat on. So it was kind of like advertising. So,
see,
you gave us some free advertising, so I'm more willing to eat that cost. But yes, I do blame the Canadian government for a lot of things, including the fact that I lose money just about every time you buy something from there. But that's okay, because I'm super excited and happy that you're a part of our family.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah. Is Father David a priest? I mean, is that?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yep.
So you get bonus points there too. I mean, you get bonus points with the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
What?
The priest.
Okay.
He's got a direct channel, man. I went to Catholic school for like 20 years. Okay.
I'm not Catholic. Okay. I also have a direct channel. We all do. So let's not go there. Okay.
Yeah.
We don't talk politics or theology in our breakdown.
I had my knuckles wrapped too many times by nuns.
We are not going to go there. We are not going to go there.
Oh, man. All right. Here you go. Johnny, any word on how bowl practice is going?
No, I mean, I've heard it's going well. I mean, they're picking up the tempo. It's been kind of, not practicing this day, practicing the next day. I've heard it's been good. Haven't heard anything beyond just, it's good, flying around. Kids love the competition.
Right.
But they're still like probably about 5 practices in, so it's kind of like still in the fun phase.
Because they took Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I believe, off because of finals, and then they had to get back at it. And
right. So they're still kind of early in that bowl prep phase at this point. Yeah. So
this is a loaded question, but I'm bringing it up anyway. Ty B, how's the 3-3-5 against the run?
It's like with anything. How do you use it?
Exactly.
The 3-3-5 in its original form is terrible against the run. Terrible. And that's why no one in the Big 12 can stop the run back when they were doing that.
Okay? Look, as an offensive coordinator, I would lick my chops when we would be going up against a 3-3 stack. Are you kidding me? Because your numbers are great as far as who you're going to block, and there's room for linemen to move around. And oh my gosh, love the old school 3-3-5 stack.
So, but the thing is what Marcus Freeman and Luke Fickell did at Cincinnati, it was a lot different because it was a 3-3-5 geared towards being able to insert different people in the box. And what I would encourage you to do, Ty, is we actually, you know what? I'm going to actually find it while we're talking, because we did a breakdown of Marcus Freeman's defense when he got hired.
That's right, we did.
And we explained why I felt that his 3-3-5 was so much more effective against the run than past defenses. And if you look at Notre Dame's defense this year, and if you look at Cincinnati's defense last year, they're both pretty good run defenses for the most part. Notre Dame's overall numbers this year don't look as impressive as they actually were because of 2 games. The first one is the Florida State game, right? Just they did not play well that game. It dragged their numbers down. And then the Navy game, the North Carolina game, they gave up a lot of yards that game. Outside of that, I mean, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games they held their opponents under 100 yards. They had 1, 2, 3, 4 more games where they held their opponents. I'll say 1, 2, 3, 4 more games where they held their opponents under 130 yards rushing. And we're, on the season, we're at 127. Well, that's pretty good. I mean, in 2019, they were 151. In 2018, with that great D line, they were 139.5 yards per game. So this year was pretty good. I think this year was the third best run defense of the Brian Kelly tenure. They were better last year. They only gave up 113. Part of that is because they didn't play a triple option team last year. And the other part of that too is they played some pretty bad offenses. But 17, they were higher. 16, they were definitely higher. I mean, we just skip past the Brian Van Gorder era and not look at those numbers. And in 2012, they had a better number. So this year's run defense was the third best of the Brian Kelly era when it came to rushing. And I'm looking at it now. They gave up 3.7 yards per rush, which is the second best. 3.71 yards per rush attempt, which is the second best of the Brian Kelly tenure, and they were basically a 3-3-5. They just at times they'd go more 4 down, but that was always what Marcus Freeman's defense was. And then you look at their rush defense last year at Cincinnati, they finished the year ranked 13th in rushing defense at 111.1 yards per game. And this year, Cincinnati, also running a 3-3-5, was still pretty good against the run. Not as good as they were last year. They were down to 44th last year. Despite bringing everybody back, they were down to 44th. But they were still good at 137.5. And part of that, too, again, is because they played an option team, right? You know, they gave up 192 yards to Navy. So it's good in that they do a good job of, number one, being disruptive up front. They insert their linebackers from all over. They're always going to have at least 4 guys attacking the line of scrimmage. That's something Oklahoma didn't do when they were in their 3-3-5. They were not a team that was going to really be good at attacking down. Like it was more passive. It was about protecting the perimeter, protect the perimeter. And they would use the linebackers to do that. This defense is we're going to protect the perimeter with our speed and our alignment, but we're going to start wider so then we can condense and play the run. It's a very well-designed defense when it comes to using the safeties to protect the linebackers effectively, right? And then doing a good job of allowing your linebackers to run and flow to the football. And I think this year, at times when the Notre Dame corners were playing really well against the run, that's when the run defense was even at its best because they could funnel everything back inside. And that's a key component to it too. So a lot of 3-3-5s, in my opinion, are passive, and that's not really Marcus Freeman's deal. It's not a passive group.
No, they're not passive at all. No question.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put a couple of the breakdowns we did about Marcus Freeman's defense into the chat. So some of the videos that we had about that, I'm gonna put those into the chat, and so people can kind of watch some of those early breakdowns we did. Like I have one, how do the linebackers fit into his defense, things like that. That'll kind of give you all a chance to listen to those and just evaluate what we thought about that defense. Okay.
While you do that, I will pull up another question. David Jones, I don't know if you know this off the top of your head. He says, Vincent Bryan, what are the number of the early enrollees? So 21 guys signed. Do you know how many? I think it's double digits.
I think it's like 13 again. Let me find it here real quick.
It's a good number. I know that.
Yeah, it's a lot. I have to find it again. It's double digits for sure. I'm pretty sure of that. Let me just I don't know where I have that
that's okay.
at. So I have to find it. But I have it written down somewhere. But it's a lot.
Demetrius,
about half the class, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Demetrius, who has more upside, Buckner or Dante Moore? Good question.
Dante as a passer, Buckner as an all-around player. So it just depends. And the reason I say it like that, it's just so that it depends on what kind of offense you're running. You know, if you're a team that just wants to drop back and throw the football, then you're going to want Dante Moore's upside. If you're a team that wants a dual threat player, then you're gonna like Tyler Buckner's upside more and fit more. So, but they're both excellent. Dante grades out much higher than Tyler did as a passer coming out of high school. Tyler grades out much higher than Dante does as a dynamic playmaker coming out of high school. I won't say much. Neither's much better. That was too strong. They're both better.
Right.
But I wouldn't say much better.
Sean Kane, Brian and Vince, you guys are the best. I'm a new subscriber to the boards. Love listening to you guys. Go Irish. Thanks, Sean. Thanks for joining us on a Sunday, man. That's awesome. Timeout Tom has a question for you. Little housekeeping. How do you switch from a monthly to a yearly member of the board?
It's a good question. Tom, do me a favor. Email me at brian@irishbreakdown.com. I'm going to put that in there because that is a question I'm going to have to ask my wife. So if anyone that doesn't know, if you're a new member, my wife is my tech person. She's the one that built the site, and she would be the one that knows that. So I'd have to ask her that question. So I'm pretty sure she's not listening today because she's got a lot of work to do herself. This would be one of those days where I wish she was listening because then she could just kind of jump in there and answer that question.
Here, Joshua, if Lance Taylor doesn't move from running back to wide receiver coach, who are 2 to 3 names on the short list that you would love to see at wide receiver coach?
I'm going to avoid answering this question, Josh, and not for two reasons. Number one is I don't really have any firm names. There's one coach I definitely don't want that is a hot name on the message boards for some reason. I don't know why. I want someone who is a proven commodity as a coach and a recruiter. And the reason I'm going to avoid the question, Josh, is there's nothing wrong with the question. It's just what has happened in the past is I've put names out that I like. And I've done that. Like I've talked about Curtis Johnson and Tyron Carrier. And then I don't mention somebody's like, well, you don't think so-and-so is a good coach? No, I just told you the guys that, off the top of my head that I like. Number one, it kind of avoids that thing. But more importantly, what tends to happen is I'll mention like, hey, there's 3 or 4 guys that I like. And then that guy doesn't get hired. And then immediately there are some that look at the new hire as like, oh, they didn't hire who we should have hired.
Right.
The reality is there's a lot of good receiver coaches out there. There's a lot of guys out there that could do the job. Some I know about, some I don't know about, right? That could do the job and at a high level that they need to pursue. Some in the NFL, some in college. So I just want to see that. I want to see them hire somebody that can do the job. But again, it's also the other reason I'm not going to discuss it right now is because as of right now, Del Alexander hasn't been fired.
Yeah, they're not looking.
Well, the only receivers coach I know that Marcus Freeman's talked to is Brian Hartline, and that didn't really go that far. Other than that, I haven't heard anything about them looking at other receiver coaches, which has me a little bit nervous. But it is what it is. Now, what I'll probably do, Josh, is if they do officially move on, I'll probably try to put together a longer, extensive list of guys that I like, but then also talk about the characteristics. So it'll be more about the traits that I'm looking for and I'll mention some guys that fit that. Then it will be specific. They need to go get this guy. Because like I said, there's a lot. I could give you 10 guys, right, that of coaches that I know that I like that do a good job, that I think would do a good job here. And it still wouldn't be a full list of guys that I think could come to Notre Dame and do a really good job. And that's kind of why I have that opinion.
Joseph Barrett, Brian, what are your impressions of Drayton Bowen?
It's Peyton Bowen.
All right, Peyton Bowen.
I like him. Peyton Bowen, for those who don't know, he's a 2023 safety from Denton Guyer High School in Texas. He's a 6'1.5", 6'2"-ish kid, about 185. Really good high school football player. Ranks as a top 75 caliber recruit. I think one of the services has him like around 50. He is more of like a rangy, can play free. He can play the middle of the field because he's so long and rangy, Vince. He's also a guy that can play the alleys really effectively. I don't know yet if he's a guy that I think is a huge man cover guy yet. I think he's more of a rangy zone type of player right now, but he can really run. He can really play. He can hit. Pretty decent receiver, but he's a top recruit. Notre Dame likes him a ton. And right now, I think Notre Dame is in a really good shape with him. I would probably, again, this is just off my gut because I have not officially graded him yet. I'd probably grade him as like a top 75 type of player, top 75 to 100 type of player, which is good. I mean, that's a pretty darn good player. I don't know if I'd be quite there with the top 50 stuff right now. That's kind of where I would be on that. So.
ND Irish fan 61, love this one. He says, join your site recently and getting my IB shirt tomorrow, and we'll wear it proudly at the QB Lunch Club here in Austin, Texas, to advertise the Irish Breakdown site. Go Irish. In Texas, baby. That's yeah, man, that's awesome. Love that. Joshua B., which defensive recruit from the last 2 cycles are you most excited to see develop under the coaching of Freeman and the defensive staff?
I can't pick one.
I was going to say, you got to pick one guy.
Yeah, I mean, Josh, I'm gonna honor your question because I feel like with Josh, I just refused to answer his other question And I don't, you know what I mean? Like on the receiver coach, I'm like, this guy's like, I'm not asking freaking questions. This guy never answered my question. So I'm gonna answer this one. If there's one guy, I'm gonna pick one guy. It's gonna be a little bit of a surprise. It's gonna be Benjamin Morrison. And the reason I say that is because he's the one guy that I think has a chance to really change the direction of the cornerback position in Notre Dame. And the reason I could say Tyson Ford, I could say Aiden Gabbera, I could say pick a linebacker. There's like 5 of the 6 linebackers.
Yep.
You know, you could pick other corners, but here's the reason I'm going to go with Benjamin Morrison. Notre Dame's done a great job recruiting linebackers. It should not be this hard. What Marcus Freeman is doing is not something that should have been impossible for Clark Lee to do. Clark Lee just wasn't aggressive enough in recruiting. That's as simple as that. He was, if you know Clark, he is, and I've said this a million times, he's super thoughtful and methodical. Like he's a really smart, thoughtful, intelligent guy. I remember I've said this when I interviewed him, like you could just see him where I'd ask him a question, and if there was any kind of depth to the question, he would pause because he just really wanted to make sure he thought it through and gave a really good answer. Like he's a real smart guy, real thoughtful, intellectual guy, ton of respect for Clark Lee. But he recruited that way too. And to me, that's kind of problematic because you need to be a little bit more, okay, this is my guy, let's go get him. You can't wait as long as they waited on some kids. And he also kind of got a little obsessed with the projection and what, you know, I mean, just like he convinced himself that Caleb Offord was this, oh God, we got to get Caleb Offord because he had these tools, but then like the film's not that great, you know? So that was kind of, to me, a problem for me. Linebacker in general, though, is not a hard position to recruit to Notre Dame. They've been, I mean, you go back and Manti and Darius Fleming and Steve Filer and, you know, I mean, you could go on and on and on. That Jalen Smith, Doug Randolph. I mean, they've recruited Niles Morgan. They've recruited big-time linebackers for a long time. This is an even more special class. But D-line, they've really done a great job in recent years of producing a lot of NFL players. Cornerback is the problem because right now they don't have anybody they can point to and say, you're going to be the next so-and-so. A lot of these kids don't know who Julian Love was. Because even though Julian Love was an All-American, he wasn't a big national name guy that all the people knew. He's a 4th-round draft pick, and he's not, you know, he's not like a name in the NFL like Harrison Smith was a safety or, you know, Jalen Smith was at linebacker for a little time there. Benjamin Morrison, to me, has a chance. If he's as good as I think he can be, he could be a very high draft pick, in my opinion. He's got that kind of talent. If he comes in, if they can produce him or Ryan Barnes, but one of those two, but Benjamin Morrison, if he becomes the player I think he can be, and with the coaching of Mike Mickens and Marcus Freeman, and he's the high pick that I think he can be, the impact cost he can be, now all of a sudden Notre Dame becomes a popular place for corners as well. That's a game changer. That's a complete game changer. And so that's why I look at, of all the players, Benjamin Morrison's the one I'm most excited to see develop because I think he's the guy who can have not just a big impact on the field, but he can have a big impact in opening up recruiting avenues that right now are much harder for Notre Dame to go down because of just the lack of proven track record of developing big-time corners. And so that's why I would answer that. So hopefully I was able to make up with that answer for not answering your question about the receivers coach.
Okay, one more position player coach, and then a bunch of coaching questions. John A1, how much better can Ahrensberger get? Seems like Foster needs to return to bridge the recruiting gap at defensive end.
I think that last part's fair. John, you know, we talked a little bit about this on the message board. I think Ahrensberger could be a really good end. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement for him. I mean, he is athletic and he is powerful. He's just still learning how to play the game. His improvement now is basically just technical, and that's where you want to be. Like, I don't think he needs to get any bigger. He's a pretty strong kid. It's now about technical, and that's been Mike Elson's specialty, right? And so, and we started to see Alex Ahrensberger get more and more playing. I mean, let's not forget, he had a huge game-changing play against Cincinnati. We all remember Isaiah Foskey with the strip sack. We remember Drew White picking up the fumble, but we forget sometimes that the reason that he had to pump and bring the ball down Desmond Ridder is because Alex Ahrensberger came off the edge, got his hands up. He went to throw, had to pump, and that's when Isaiah Foskey hit him. I think the kid could be a really good player. Mm-hmm. He just needs to learn the game more and become more. It's got to be more natural to him, the double moves and the counters and all that kind of stuff. You know, he's the kind. That's where Mike Elson's going to make his money because that's where Elson's been good, is with that stuff. And so that's what
Absolutely.
I really like about Alex's future.
All right, now we got a string of coaching questions.
If it's
all
about
right?
who they're looking at certain positions, I'm not diving into that stuff. We're
Right.
not going to address that. I put a little something on the message board, but we're not going to address
Well,
that.
no, this is more of a big
Okay.
picture question. Is it better from Alan? He says, is it better to go for a pro coach or a college position coach?
It
I think
just
that just
depends on the
varies.
coach.
Yeah.
There's never one right or wrong answer. It depends on the coach.
Right.
I mean, it just depends on the coach. Look, I could tell you right now, hey, go get a pro O-line coach because they're still technicians and all this kind of stuff. Well, there's some pro O-line coaches that have no concept of how to teach college kids how to play the game. They could not
Right.
teach to a freshman how to play the game. There are some NFL pro coaches at an O-line that would be great college coaches, and vice versa. It just depends on the coach. What you need to make sure you're doing, because like people say, well, he guy's never recruited before. I don't care. If you are organized, if you work hard, and if you have a personality and you're honest with people, you can be a great recruiter if you're willing to work at it, whether you've done it before or not. Brian Hartline had zero coaching experience when he got hired at Ohio State in 2017. He was a GA for a year, and then he's been in a position. He's one of the best recruiters and best wide receiver coaches in the game. Why? He knows the game and he knows how to teach it. And Vince, you know this as a teacher. Some people just have a gift for teaching.
Yeah.
And some people have been teaching in public schools for 40 years and they still suck at it.
Don't.
Exactly. And some people are 24 years old, fresh out of college, and man, they are just great teachers.
Yep.
Because they have a knack, they have a gift for it, and they're passionate about it, and they work at it, and they care about the kids. Same thing with coaching. If you have the gift, if you're willing to work at it, if you're willing to be honest, if you have a passion for young people, guess what? You're going to be pretty good at this coaching thing. Whether, and it goes back to my old saying, if you got the chops, you got the chops. But you got to find something that can relate to young people and can teach young people and is going to put in the work as a recruiter. Whether that's coach or a person in coach in college or pros, it doesn't matter to me.
Ty B says, and this is obviously speculation all the way. It says, if Ryan Day goes to the Bears, would Alford or Hartline consider leaving for Notre Dame?
Oh, I'm sure they would consider it. Part of it would be who's the
next
new
head coach,
right?
Yep.
I would imagine there'd be a window there for Notre Dame to say, hey, go do something now. Because if you wait for Luke Fickell to be named the head coach, you might not get those guys. Because what would probably happen is if Luke Fickell would have to strongly consider making Brian Hartline like the pass game coordinator or the O coordinator, something like that, right?
Right.
But if you're Marcus Freeman, say, hey, look, man, like your coach isn't there. You come here, we can do some things, we can do some magic. But I don't think you can get both of them, though. Because you said Alford and Hartline.
Yeah, because they're both offensive guys.
Yes, Alford and Hartline. Yeah. There's only one spot.
Right.
You got Lance Taylor at one, and then you've got an opening. Now, the thing is, Lance Taylor could move from 1 to 1. You could move Lance Taylor to
so you got room for one of those guys.
And if I were to be able to pick one of those two, I personally would go with Tony Alford. That's just me.
No, I would too.
And I'd move Lance Taylor to receivers.
And it's totally a personal bias because I've met Tony and 100%.
Yeah. Now, it's not just personal, but I've said before, I have a hard time being objective when it comes to Tony Alford.
That's what I'm saying.
When I sit back and look at it, though, just look at the track record. Look at the job he's done coaching running backs at Notre Dame.
And he's such a good recruiter.
Look at the job he did coaching running backs at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Look at the players he's produced. He's a great recruiter. He's a good guy.
Yeah.
So it's not just. When I say that, I think I can be objective because I can look at the track record and evaluate the job. But I also have to be fair and honest with people about this is a guy that helped me get back into coaching. This is someone who I had a relationship with. Now, what I loved about Coach Alford is he understood I had a job to do. And if I was critical of the running backs or critical of the job that happened, he understood that. There was no hard feelings because he understood I had a job to do. And usually, like most great coaches, I could never be as hard on him as he is on himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually true of most great coaches. When coaches get real sensitive about criticism of people outside, I always get nervous. I'm like, that guy's clearly not being hard enough on himself because he should be that demanding of himself. But that's a whole different deal. But if I could only have one of those two, it'd be Tony Alford, and then I'd move Lance Taylor to receivers. I think Lance Taylor would have an even greater impact at Notre Dame as a receivers coach than he's had at running backs coach. And that should tell you something. Okay, I'm gonna
This isn't about I don't know. You don't want to put anything up about who's going to get a job, so I'm going to let that one go by.
I'll just pull it up, and if I can't answer it, I can't answer it.
Okay, fair enough.
You've already hinted about it.
Yeah, I know. It's our guy Tommy. He says, "What's your opinion on James Laurinaitis?"
See, that's different. I don't mind.
Okay.
If you ask me about a coach, I'll answer it.
Okay, fair enough. Because he put a picture
who's going to be the new O-line coach? Who's going to be the new,
And I'm sure you saw it. He put a picture out of Notre Dame's indoor facility yesterday, whatever. And so it got people, talking about it. So what's your opinion of him?
So first of all, James Laurinaitis and Marcus Freeman were teammates in college for 4 years.
Yes,
They've been friends ever since, right?
Yes,
they are good friends. If I got a head coaching job somewhere, Vince would be taking pictures from that facility at some point in time because he'd be coming to see me. Now that doesn't mean that he'd be, leaving, as the new head of Irish Breakdown to come, visit. You know what I mean? A friend would come see me. Now, would I try to then hire Vince? Of course I would, but it doesn't mean he's going to come. Right. I have been told that Coach Freeman and Coach and James, he's not Coach Laurinaitis, but James Laurinaitis have talked about possibly him becoming a coach. Would that be as an analyst? Would that be as a GA? Would that be as a full-time coach? I don't know. I don't know if that's something James Laurinaitis has any interest in. But my understanding is the visit yesterday was just about a friend coming to visit a friend during bowl prep after classes are done. That's all there is to it. Now, does that mean that something may not happen down the road? I'm not saying that won't happen, but I don't believe. Now, that also doesn't mean that while he's there,
they're not having a discussion about it over,
hey, let's watch some film. These 4 kids we just signed that you could coach if you wanted to come.
Right.
I'm sure that happened, but look, I'm comfortable with either one of those. If Nick Lazinski gets a chance to become a full-time coach, great. If they decide to go a different route and move Mike Elson to linebackers and hire Larry Black as the D-line coach, which means Coach Lazinski doesn't have a job unless they're going to hire him as a special teams coach. But I don't think they will. I believe they have identified who the special teams coach they want, and I believe that's going to happen somewhat soon. That's all I'm going to say. If that's the route they decide to go, I love Nick Lazinski, and I think Nick Lazinski could be a really good linebackers coach. But as I'll say about any position, he's not the only good option at linebacker or great option at linebacker, and that's why I've been real hesitant to say they got to hire this guy. Even Tony Alford, like I put it out there, this would be my dream scenario, but I'm not there. You got to call Alford. They may not be able to afford him. He may not. There's a lot of things to play there. There's a lot of good options there. They just need to make sure that they're hiring great options. There's not like O-line. It's like I put Harry Heastand's name out in an intel piece at Irish Breakdown, and now I have people say, if they don't hire Harry Heastand, I'm going to be disappointed. And I'm like, that's exactly why I hate putting these intel pieces out where I give names or if I tell people this is what I want, because that's what it turns into. If they hire so-and-so, I'm going to be disappointed. Like, that guy's a great football coach. No, he's not Harry Heastand, but who thought Harry Heastand was going to be Harry Heastand when he got hired? I remember a lot of Notre Dame fans were pissed when they hired Harry Heastand because Tennessee, he didn't do a great job at Tennessee because it wasn't a great fit. He had a horrible head coach. He's not really an SEC kind of guy. And they were like, we're glad to be done with him. And then look what he does at Notre Dame. Right. So, look, I would love to see Harry Heastand back. But there's some other good coaches that I'd be like, okay, he's not Harry, but he's pretty good too. And that's what we have to say is like it's not just one option there. Tommy, if either one of those things would happen, I'd be fine, because I think if Marcus Freeman thinks James Laurinaitis can coach right now, then I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, because that means he's talked ball with them. Mm-hmm. He knows he's seen them relating to kids. He's seen them at football. See the thing, a lot of these guys like Deion Sanders never really coached before as an official coach that much. But I remember seeing Deion at the Under Armour things. Like, Deion can coach. Like, he knows how to teach these kids how to play corner. Like, he's out there instructing and teaching. Like, this guy knows how to coach, right? And then other guys, you're just like, this guy's talking Chinese, and these kids have no clue what they're talking about, And so but a lot of these former players, every summer they're working camps. They're teaching young people. They're doing these like charity camps or their own camps, and they know how to teach. And you see them in that action. You're like, man, that guy could really coach. And I'm assuming that Marcus Freeman has seen that.
Yeah. And
that's why he thinks he could come. And Vince, we're gonna wrap up here in the next 5 minutes. Let's get through some questions here as we wrap things up. And back to obviously 12:30, we're gonna start our Oklahoma State breakdowns. But let's get some more here before we get out of here.
What from Justin? When is a fair expectation to learn about the fifth-year decisions that need to be made? I think that's a really
A
good
lot
question.
of those will happen. And I had an article about that where I looked at the whole roster, and there's a lot of decisions that have to be made on 6-year seniors, fifth-year seniors, stuff like that. And I would say that we'll start getting answers in the week following the bowl game, because semesters are going to start.
Yep.
Some of these kids are going to have to start going other places. We'll start getting more and more of these things. We'll actually probably get some leading up to the bowl game, and then we'll definitely start getting more after the bowl game.
John says, based on what we've seen in the past 4 Notre Dame games, who has the higher ceiling at safety, Watts or Henderson?
I'd probably go Watts, but I mean, it's close. I mean, I really liked what I saw from Ramon Henderson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Xavier's a more instinctive player. Ramon Henderson is more fast, longer. I'd probably go Xavier, but it's close. They both showed a lot of upside at safety.
This is funny, so I had to bring it up. Josh says, my wife said if I cancel my gym membership, then I can get an IB membership. I'll be joining IB Nation and packing on some extra holiday layers.
No, listen on your phone and walk while you're listening to the show, right?
See?
So there you go. Or hop on the treadmill and get some action in. There
you go.
Perfect.
Okay.
Love it, Josh, but thank you for that.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Great, Josh.
That's
I
awesome.
love that. Real quick, Mark says, do you anticipate coaching changes being announced right after the bowl game or lingering throughout the spring?
We'll have some answers right after the bowl game on some of these hires. I'm told that this is all I'll say. There's more on the message board. As I said, I'm going to put something up on special teams here probably later today. The list of candidates for O-line has been narrowed. They're zeroing in on some targets. I don't know a whole lot about what's going on at the skill position. I don't know if they're looking for a new receivers coach. I've heard nothing, which makes me think that they're not moving on from there, because like Quinn's still coaching the O-line, and we know that they're interviewing other people. I have not heard of anyone being interviewed at receiver other than Brian Hartline, which leads me to believe that the first big mistake of Coach Freeman's tenure would be keeping Del Alexander. And I think, but right now I have no evidence that, other than just people telling me he's gone, I have no evidence. You know, he was on the road a week ago before the dead period started in Florida recruiting 2023 kids, from what I was told. And so Quinn's not doing that.
Right.
So, but I don't have a lot of, and I've heard nothing about the D coordinator that's definitive. I would imagine that we'll have answers pretty soon after the bowl game.
This is interesting, and we can touch on it real quick. Stymie Snurdley says, with the new NIL rules, does Freeman allow nameplates on the back next year? I don't think those two things are linked, to be honest with you. I mean,
does anyone not know who Kyle Hamilton is because
right.
he doesn't have a name on the back of his jersey? I mean,
that's what I'm saying. I don't think either one has.
I'm also one of those people that I don't care if they want to put names on the jerseys. I don't care. I mean, if
Right.
they do it for bowl games, I mean, do it all the time. That's just one of those things that doesn't bother me. Yes, it's tradition. They haven't had it. I believe there's been times they've had it though in the past. I don't remember for sure.
It's
that
been
may
a
just
while.
been bowl games. I don't care. I mean, if they want to do that, they want to do that. That's fine. As long as the overall feel of the uniform stays relatively consistent.
Yeah.
They want to put names in the back of the jerseys. I mean, I'd honestly let the players vote on it, and if they want to do it, then do it.
Right. Like it does. Yeah. Whatever.
Now, what would piss me off as a coach, if I see a kid going like this, that's what I hate.
Then they're gone.
You know what I mean?
Then they're gone.
They're not gone. Yeah, the names.
Player,
okay, yeah, the names. Yeah,
that's what
I would say. That like the first time I see somebody doing something like this, names are coming off the jerseys.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Last one here from Justin says, barring an unexpected pickup in the portal, are we looking at another platoon situation in 22 at quarterback?
No. I think that
I think there's going to be a clear-cut starter.
I think whoever that is going to play. Now, if Drew Pine, if Tyler Buckner, well, let me rephrase that. If Tyler Buckner doesn't win the job and Drew Pine does, do I think they'll still play Tyler Buckner? Yes.
That's a good point.
Tyler Buckner's going to play quarterback next year.
Yes.
I guess I'm just kind of anticipating my initial response to your question, Justin, is I expect Tyler Buckner to win the job. And if they do that, there's going to be no platoon. But if Drew Pine wins the job, Tyler Buckner's still going to play.
Right.
So,
that's a good point.
Walk back my initial no and be like, I think it depends on who starts. If Tyler Buckner starts, nope. If Drew Pine starts, yes. there will be a rotation. It'll look a lot like this year, in my opinion.
That's interesting. I never thought of it that way, but that's a really good point.
Yep, just depends who starts.
All right, that's all I got, Brian.
Okay. I did see one question.
Okay.
Drew, what sites do you recommend for reliable recruiting grades and info off the record? irishbreakdown.com.
This one.
That's
why I didn't bring that up, because I
just had to get there, It's like, I recommend irishbreakdown.com.
Yeah.
So that's it. So Vince, why don't you take us out of here, man? Appreciate you, everybody.
Hey, everybody, thanks so much for joining us on a Sunday. Really appreciate it. It's always a ton of fun to have everybody, especially on a weekend. So we really appreciate it. Hit that. Go ahead.
The 25% off special for the Christmas people if you're a member of Irish Breakdown, that's going to last to December 31st. So if you want to take advantage of that, shoot me an email, or if you're on the message board, it's on the message board. I forgot to tell you that, Vince. Sorry about that.
Cool. No, all good. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that notification bell so you know when we're going to be coming on live, because we will be doing that for the next few days for sure. And then also, if you're listening on a podcast, make sure you give us a 5-star review. Hit that subscribe button. We'll always appreciate all of that and all the comments as well. But really love having everybody here. It's a highlight of my day. So Brian appreciates it. I appreciate it. Appreciate it. Wow. But anyway, we will be back tomorrow. We are going to start jumping into our Oklahoma State preview. So we're going to start talking some Okie State, baby, and how that relates to Notre Dame moving forward, because we are less than 2 weeks away.
Big game.
Less than 2 weeks away from this thing. So I'm really fired up about it, really excited about it. And of course, less than a week away from Christmas. So Merry Christmas to everybody out there, and whatever holiday that you celebrate this time of year. And we will talk to everybody next time on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.